The night was quiet enough that I could hear the ticking of the clock from the hallway. I had been sitting in the living room with the television on low, more for company than anything else, when the knock came. 3 soft taps, evenly spaced, and then silence. It was late, later than anyone usually came by, and I almost thought I had imagined it. But when I muted the TV, the silence that followed told me it was real. I stood and crossed the floor, pulling the door open a careful inch before swinging it wider. On the other side stood Nora Hartley, my mother's oldest friend. She looked smaller in the dim light of the hallway, her dark hair pinned back loosely, her coat half-buttoned as if she'd left her house in a hurry. She was holding a cardboard box against her hip, the edges worn and softened with age. Before I could ask what brought her here, she smiled faintly and said, "Don't tell your mom about this." Her voice was low, almost playful, but there was something heavier behind it, a quiet insistence. I blinked, caught off guard. "Okay," I said slowly, stepping aside. She slipped past me, carrying the box into the warm light of the living room. I closed the door, still half wondering if I was dreaming. Nora had always been around in the background of my life, holidays, birthdays, family dinners. She and my mother had been close since college, the kind of friends who could go months without talking and still fall back into rhythm as if no time had passed. But I had never seen her like this, nervous, secretive, clutching something that seemed important. She set the box down on the coffee table and sat on the edge of the couch. For a moment she just looked at it, as though she wasn't sure how to begin. Then she glanced at me, her expression softening. "Your father gave me these a long time ago," she said finally. "I wasn't sure if I should keep them, but I think maybe it's time you see them." My throat tightened. My father had passed away when I was 16, and even now, years later, the mention of him carried a weight. I lowered myself into the chair across from her, eyes fixed on the box. "What's inside?" She opened the flaps carefully, as though the contents might break. Inside were several bundles of letters tied neatly with ribbon, their envelopes yellowed at the edges. Resting on top was a small wooden music box, its surface scratched but polished from years of being handled. I reached out, almost without thinking, and touched the lid of the music box. This was his. Nora nodded. "He asked me to hold on to these. Said they were things you might want to read one day, but not too soon." I wasn't sure when not too soon would end. Until now. I couldn't speak for a moment. My fingers hovered over the nearest stack of letters, the handwriting instantly familiar. My father's looping script. I remembered watching him sign checks at the kitchen table, his pen moving with quiet precision. Seeing it again brought a sharp ache to my chest. Nora leaned back slightly, studying me. "I know it's late. I should have called. But sometimes," she exhaled, shaking her head, "sometimes you just feel like you have to do something before you change your mind." I swallowed hard and nodded. "I'm glad you came." We sat in silence for a while, the television screen flickering faintly in the corner. Muted. I untied one ribbon carefully and pulled out the first envelope. Inside was a letter written in my father's firm hand, dated just a few months before I was born. His words spilled across the page. Hopes, fears, small jokes meant for a son he hadn't yet met. Reading them felt like stepping into a room I thought had been sealed shut. I had never heard him speak like this, not even in memory. I handed the letter to Nora, and she read quietly, her eyes glistening before she folded it back. "Maybe," she said softly, "it's better if we read just a few at a time." I nodded again, setting the rest of the bundle aside. My chest felt heavy, but in a way that was strangely comforting. I rose and went to the kitchen, putting the kettle on. "Tea?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. "That would be nice," she replied. When I returned with 2 mugs, she had the music box in her hands. She turned the tiny key slowly, and a soft tune filled the room, worn, faint, but still carrying the melody. For a moment, neither of us spoke. When the music faded, she placed it back gently and wrapped her hands around the warm mug I set in front of her. "I know this is strange," she said, "but I didn't want your mother to worry. Not yet. She wouldn't understand why I kept these for so long." I met her eyes across the table. "So that's why I can't tell her?" Her smile was small but sure. "Not yet," she said again. "Someday, yes. But for now, let's just keep this between us." I sat back, sipping the tea, the weight of the secret settling between us like another presence in the room. For the first time in years, I felt my father close by, not as a memory, but as a voice carried forward through words meant for me. And though I didn't fully understand why, I agreed. "I won't tell her," I said quietly. Nora's smile deepened, soft but certain. "Good," she murmured. "That's what I was hoping you'd say." The following evening, I kept catching myself glancing at the box on my coffee table. I hadn't moved it, hadn't even dared to sort through the stacks of letters, but its presence was impossible to ignore. It felt like the air in the room carried something heavier now, something that had been hidden for years and was finally stirring. Just after 9, another knock came. This one was softer, more hesitant, but I knew before I opened the door who it would be. Nora stood there, not with a box this time, but with a lamp tucked under her arm. The cord dangled awkwardly at her side, and she wore a tired smile. "It broke," she said simply, holding it out, "and I thought, maybe you could help me with it." I raised an eyebrow but stepped aside. "Of all the repair shops in town, you came to me?" Her smile widened just a fraction. "Sometimes it's not about the repair shop." She set the lamp on the table, next to the letters, and glanced at them as though acknowledging their silent presence. Then she sat, pulling her coat around herself. I fetched a screwdriver from the drawer and unscrewed the base while she watched. The silence between us wasn't uncomfortable. If anything, it felt almost deliberate, as if she wanted me to notice that she wasn't here for idle chatter. Eventually, though, she spoke. "Did you read any more?" I paused, looking up from the lamp. "Not yet, just that first one." Her lips curved faintly. "He wrote a lot, your father, more than anyone realized." I nodded, fiddling with the wiring until I found the loose connection. "You knew him better than most, didn't you?" Her gaze dropped to the letters, her hands tightening slightly around her mug. "In some ways, he was easy to talk to, and he trusted me. That's why he gave me those." There was a weight in her voice, not guilt exactly, but something near it, like carrying a burden that wasn't fully hers. I fixed the wire, tightened the screw, and set the lamp upright again. With a click, the light filled the room, warm and steady. She smiled at that, a little brighter this time. "See? You're better than a repair shop." I chuckled softly and sat across from her. "Tea?" She nodded. While the kettle boiled, she picked up one of the bundles, untying the ribbon with care. By the time I returned with mugs, she had chosen a letter and was reading it silently. When I sat down, she slid it across the table to me. It was addressed to me, written when I was about 7. My father had described an afternoon we'd spent at the park. the way I had insisted on climbing the tallest slide, though I was terrified halfway up. His words painted the moment vividly. His pride, his amusement, his promise that he'd always be there when I was afraid. I hadn't remembered the day until I read it. Then the image returned in flashes. My small hands clutching the ladder, his voice calling encouragement, the feel of his arms catching me at the bottom when I finally slid down. My chest tightened, and I looked up at Nora. "He never gave this to me," I said quietly. She shook her head. "No, he wanted to, but life moves faster than you think." And then her words trailed off, but she didn't need to finish the sentence. I folded the letter carefully, my hands trembling slightly, and slid it back into its envelope. "Why now? Why after all these years?" Her eyes softened. "Because you're old enough to carry it. Old enough to understand what it means. Back then, you would have seen just words. Now, maybe you can see him." The truth of it settled into me like a stone dropping into water, ripples spreading outward. I glanced at the music box on the shelf, the letters stacked neatly beside it, and felt the pieces of a puzzle I hadn't even known existed slowly coming together. For a while, we just sat with our tea, letting the quiet fill the spaces. Then she said it again, her voice softer but carrying the same gravity as before. "Don't tell your mom about this. Not yet." There was no playfulness in her tone this time. It wasn't a request. It was something closer to a plea. I studied her for a long moment. She wouldn't understand? She'd see it as betrayal, Nora whispered. That I kept them. That I waited. She wouldn't ask why. She'd just feel hurt. I nodded slowly, the words sinking in. I thought of my mother, strong, stubborn, protective of the past she shared with my father. Secrets weren't things she handled gently. "All right," I said finally. "It stays between us." Nora smiled then, tired but relieved, her shoulders loosening as if I had lifted something heavy from them. The lamp glowed warmly beside us, steady and unbroken now, and for the first time that night, the room felt less haunted and more alive. We spent another hour reading fragments of the past. Postcards, notes scribbled on hotel stationery, reminders of a man whose voice had faded but not disappeared. Each letter was like a window, and together we leaned closer, trying to catch the light that still shone through. When she finally stood to leave, she paused at the door and looked back. Her eyes lingered on me, her smile faint but certain. "Thank you," she said, "for helping me with the lamp, and for this." I nodded, unsure what to say. Then, as she slipped into the hallway, she repeated it one last time. "Don't tell your mom." And for reasons I couldn't yet explain, the words made me feel both trusted and trapped at once. The storm arrived on a Thursday evening, sudden and unrelenting. Rain hammered the windows, wind rattled the old frames, and thunder rolled across the neighborhood like distant artillery. I had been at my desk, trying to work, when the power flickered twice and then went out completely. The apartment sank into darkness, save for the faint glow of the street lamps outside. A moment later, that familiar knock came, 2 soft taps, a pause, then one more. Even over the sound of the rain, I recognized it instantly. I opened the door to find Nora standing there, damp from the storm, her coat pulled tight around her shoulders. She smiled faintly, her cheeks flushed from the wind. "I thought maybe we could wait this one out together," she said, holding up a small bag. Inside, I could see a box of matches and 2 stubby candles. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. We lit the candles and placed them on the coffee table. Their flickering light threw long shadows across the walls, making the room feel smaller, more private. Nora hung her coat over the chair, then sat on the couch with a quiet sigh. She looked around, her gaze lingering on the box of letters. "I was hoping you'd read more," she said softly. "I did," I admitted, pulling out one of the bundles. "There's one I can't stop thinking about." I unfolded it carefully, the paper fragile under my hands. It was a letter my father had written during a business trip, addressed not to me but to Nora. The words were warm, filled with gratitude, trust, and a kind of affection that stopped short of anything improper but carried an undeniable intimacy. He had asked her to keep watch over my mother, to be there for her if anything happened. Nora's eyes softened when she saw which letter it was. "He relied on me," she said quietly. "Not the way people might think. It wasn't about romance or anything like that. He just trusted me to carry pieces of him when he couldn't be here." I studied her face in the candlelight, searching for something: guilt, regret, longing. But what I saw instead was loyalty, plain and unyielding. "Did my mom know about this?" I asked, her lips pressed together. "Not the details. She knew we were close, but she never understood how much he depended on me. And if she did," she shook her head, "she would have seen it as competition. She always feared people could take him away from her." The storm outside grew louder, rain lashing against the windows. I leaned back, the letter still in my hands. "So that's why you've kept this hidden all these years. To protect her." "To protect both of you," Nora corrected gently. "She didn't need to question him after he was gone. And you didn't need to grow up thinking someone else stood between your parents. There was no betrayal, just friendship that mattered too much to explain." I set the letter down, my chest tight. "It feels wrong, keeping it from her." "I know," she whispered. Her eyes glistened in the candlelight. "But sometimes telling the truth too soon is the same as telling a lie. Timing matters." The room fell silent except for the storm. I thought of my mother, strong, sharp, fiercely protective of her memories. I thought of how she still kept my father's jacket hanging in the closet, how she still set a second place at the table on his birthday. If she read this letter now, she would see betrayal where none existed. But as I looked at Nora, steady and calm despite the storm, I realized what she had carried all these years. Not guilt, but responsibility. She had protected my father's memory and my mother's heart at the same time. "Why me?" I asked finally. "Why give these to me and not her?" Her gaze held mine across the flickering candlelight. "Because you're old enough to see the difference between what's true and what feels true." She never could. The words sank deep, and for the first time, I felt the full weight of the secret I had agreed to keep. It wasn't just about letters or a music box. It was about protecting the fragile threads of memory and love that my family was built on. A crack of thunder shook the windows, and we both jumped slightly. Then, without a word, Nora reached into the bag she had brought and pulled out another envelope, different from the rest. The paper was smoother, newer, the ink less faded. She placed it in front of me. "He wrote this one for you," she said, "but he never had the chance to give it to you. I kept it separate, waiting for the right moment." I opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a short postcard, dated only weeks before he passed away. His handwriting was rushed but familiar, and the words made my throat ache. "I hope you'll always remember that bravery isn't about not being afraid. It's about what you do anyway. I'm proud of you already." I pressed the card against my knee, unable to speak. Nora reached across the table, her hand brushing mine just briefly, steadying me. Outside, the storm raged on. Inside, by candlelight, I felt the truth settle into me. Not the kind of truth you rush to reveal, but the kind you guard carefully, waiting until the world is ready. Nora leaned back, her face shadowed but calm. "Don't tell your mom," she said again, her voice firm but kind. "Not yet." And for the first time, I truly understood why. The storm finally passed by morning, leaving the streets slick and shining under a pale gray sky. I hadn't slept much. The letters, the postcard, Nora's steady voice in the candlelight, they all replayed in my head as I sat at the table with a half-finished cup of coffee. It felt as if something had shifted, though I couldn't yet name what. Nora hadn't stayed the night. She left just before dawn, wrapping her damp coat around her shoulders, the candlelight flickering against her tired smile. "Don't forget," she had whispered before stepping into the hall. "Not yet." And then she was gone, leaving the air heavy with secrets. For the rest of the week, I couldn't stop thinking about the box of letters. Every evening I found myself pulling out another bundle, reading my father's words until the edges blurred. Some were written for me, childhood memories he had hoped I'd treasure. Others were for Nora, filled with trust, instructions, fragments of thoughts he hadn't wanted my mother to carry. By Sunday, I knew I couldn't keep them hidden forever. My mother deserved to see them, not all at once, not in the way they had come to me, but carefully, the way you place fragile glass on a shelf. When I told Nora, she didn't argue. She simply watched me for a long moment, then nodded. "If you think it's time, then I trust you." So the next evening, I invited my mother over. She arrived with her usual briskness, a scarf knotted neatly around her neck, her sharp eyes taking in every corner of the apartment. "You've been quiet lately," she said. "Everything all right?" I swallowed, motioning for her to sit. "There's something I need to show you." Her gaze followed mine to the coffee table, where I had placed the music box and a small stack of letters. She froze. Slowly, she reached out and touched the box, her fingers tracing the scratches along its lid. "This was his," she whispered. "Yes," I said softly. "He left more than we realized." I untied one bundle, carefully choosing a letter that felt safe, gentle, one he had written to me as a boy. I handed it to her. She unfolded it slowly, her hands trembling, and began to read. Her lips parted, and her breath caught. For a long time she said nothing, her eyes moving across the page. When she finally looked up, tears glistened on her cheeks. Why didn't I know about these? I hesitated. Behind her, in the doorway, Nora stood silently. She had come at my request, though she seemed uncertain, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. My mother noticed her then, and the expression on her face shifted. Surprise, confusion, then something sharper. "You had them," she said, her voice tight. "All this time." Nora didn't flinch. She stepped forward slowly. "He asked me to keep them, to give them to him." She nodded toward me. "When the time was right." My mother's eyes filled again, this time with anger. "You should have told me." "I wanted to," Nora said quietly. "But he trusted me with his words, and I couldn't betray that trust. I kept them safe, for him, for your son, for you. It wasn't betrayal. It was protection." The silence that followed felt heavy enough to break the room in two. I looked between them, my chest tight. Then I slid the postcard across the table. "Mom," I said gently, He wrote this just before he died. He wanted me to have it. Read it." Her hands shook as she picked it up. She read the words once, twice, her lips moving silently. Then she pressed the card against her chest, her eyes closing. A long breath escaped her, and when she opened her eyes again, the anger had dimmed. "He was proud," she whispered, "even at the end." Nora stepped closer, her voice low but steady. "He loved you. That never changed. These letters weren't meant to replace you. They were meant to keep his voice alive." My mother's shoulders slumped, and for the first time in years, I saw the exhaustion beneath her strength. She reached out, her hand trembling, and placed it over Nora's. "I don't forgive easily," she said, "but maybe I understand." The three of us sat together in the dim light, the letters spread between us like threads, reconnecting pieces of a broken fabric. The music box lay silent, but I could almost hear its melody in the back of my mind. When my mother finally stood to leave, she touched my shoulder gently. "Thank you," she whispered, "for showing me this, for reminding me." After she was gone, Nora lingered by the door. She looked at me, her eyes soft but tired, and for the first time her smile wasn't weighed down by secrecy. "You can tell your mom this part," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "The rest, well, some truths can wait a lifetime." I nodded, feeling a quiet relief settle in my chest. She needed to know, and you needed to let go. Nora's smile deepened just a little, and for once it wasn't shadowed by warning. Maybe so. As she stepped into the hallway, I thought of my father, his words, his trust, his faith in timing. Secrets, I realized, aren't always meant to hide the truth. Sometimes they're meant to protect it until it can be carried without breaking. And as the door clicked shut behind her, I knew this secret had finally found its moment.